Okay, in this video tutorial, we will be covering Unit 3, Activity 2. Before I get started, I did want to mention an important message from the guidance department that is posted in our announcements. They are asking all hybrid students to complete the Maturity Credit Questionnaire. It's a Google form. You can click on it right here. If you've already completed it in a previous semester, previously this year in semester 1, then you don't need to complete it again. But it is important that you do complete it if you haven't. They do kind of give you a warning down here that it can affect your graduation status and your ability to take courses next September. So again, it's very important you fill this out. If you need to get in touch with your guidance counselor, there is the email addresses for all of our guidance counselors right here. And I'm sure most of you know who your guidance counselor is already. But if you don't, it lists by last name, by student's last name, which guidance counselor is for each student right here. So again, this is an important message from guidance, so make sure that you take a look. All right, so our activity for this week is Unit 3, Activity 2. And so hopefully you've started to read The Great Gatsby, which is our novel for this semester. In this activity this week, we will read chapters 3 and chapters 4, and you will do your first assignment for this novel. I will point out that this Friday is a PA day, so St. Michael's will be closed. You can certainly still access the course website as you always can, but I will not be available on Friday. I will be at another school. Okay. All right. So if we click into Unit 3, Activity 2. The focus of this activity is going to be on something called modernism. And that's because The Great Gatsby is considered a modernist masterpiece. It's considered one of the first kind of modern novels. And I like to think that I know the book is over 100 years old, but the book very much feels and talks about issues that are still relevant today and that I think would be considered modern. Okay. Aside from that, it's considered a piece of modernist art. And when I say art, I mean art in a general sense: literature, visual art, movies, whatever we want to call art. It fits within the genre of modernism. Okay, or the concept of modernism. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at what we mean by modernism and why The Great Gatsby is considered a modernist piece of art or a modernist masterpiece. One of the things, well, actually, there's a video here that you can take a look at that talks specifically about modernism in American literature. So we'll focus on The Great Gatsby and its issues, and its themes, I should say. Couple of things that you'll notice for modernist stories is that they use flashbacks and they use changes in time. So before The Great Gatsby and before this time period of novels, most stories were just very simplistically beginning, middle, end. And they just were very chronological. But stories started to change that and started to use flashbacks. They started to use foreshadowing more. They started to use symbolism where characters and objects and, for example, in The Great Gatsby, colors symbolize something greater than themselves. And so you'll notice there are many aspects of The Great Gatsby that fit within the idea of modernism. Even the use of the narrator, the way that Nick tells the story, is a very modernist sort of perspective. He's not telling his own story, he's telling somebody else's. Usually the main character tells the story, and so that's different. And also, I think we'll find that Nick is not overly reliable. We can't necessarily believe everything he's saying, and the characters in the story are going to be deeper and darker and not so black and white. They're going to be very gray. And so all of this is part of what makes this story a modernist story. Okay. Um, Now we get down to the main point of our lesson. One of the biggest parts of modernism is the use of figurative language, or another way of saying figurative language is literary devices. Some teachers use figurative language, some teachers say literary devices, but they essentially mean the same thing. And so we're going to use figurative language. And figurative language is descriptive language that is not literal or not kind of factually true. You're using figurative language or descriptive language to make the story come to life and to grab the reader's attention. So, like, I mean, the most obvious example of figurative language, or the most simplistic example of figurative language, is if we go down here, is a simile, right? Comparing two unlike things using like or as. So, she slept like a log, or he is as strong as an ox, or, something like he eats like a pig, right? These are very simplistic, very cliched examples of figurative language where we're comparing people to an animal or to an object in order to make them more descriptive and make them come to life a bit. Well, a simile is a very simple example of figurative language. There are other, maybe more complex ones, like personification, onomatopoeia, metaphor. Metaphor is probably the most famous and the most common use of figurative language. Hyperbole, allusion, alliteration. And all of these examples or types of figurative language appear in The Great Gatsby. F. Scott Fitzgerald really likes to use figurative language. And so in this activity, I'm going to ask you to go through the different types of figurative language, make sure you understand the definition, and take a look at the examples. And then what you're going to have to do ultimately in this assignment, and we'll get to it in a minute here, is you're going to have to apply these figurative language terms to the novel. You're going to have to find examples of figurative language in the novel. So again, it's very important that you understand these 7 different types of figurative language, because you're going to have to show me that you understand them in the novel in your assignment here. Okay, before we get to that though, just a reminder, in every activity, so each week, you're going to be reading approximately 30 pages in the book. And so this week, we're reading The Great Gatsby chapters 2 and 3. And you can take a look at the chapter questions here. So once you've read chapters, did I say 2 and 3? I meant 3 and 4 here. So you're going to read chapters 3 and 4, and then you're going to answer the questions. I give you questions every week for the chapters that you'll read. You do not submit these questions to me. If you have any trouble with them, by all means, let me know. But they're meant as your study guide so that you know the characters, the events, the locations in the book. So on a assignment, or particularly on the final exam, when I ask you questions about The Great Gatsby, you are familiar with the content. Also, remember to keep up with your colors and symbolism worksheet, which I posted in Unit 3, Activity 1. Remember, you're trying to identify examples of objects, people, different things in the book that are labeled different colors. So you're looking for gold and yellow and white and blue and gray and green. And you're just trying to identify different objects or different people that are labeled as different colors. Okay. With that said, we go to our assignment for the week. And in this week's assignment, like I said, you're going to have to find figurative language in Great Gatsby. And so if I click on the assignment sheet, and I've given you a Google Doc, all you have to do is click on the assignment sheet. Come on. and it'll ask you to make a copy. So you're going to make your own copy, and then just fill in this document and share it with me and upload it to the Dropbox on the course website. And so if I make this a little bit bigger, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to identify and explain examples of figurative language in chapter 1 through 4 of The Great Gatsby. You do not have to go beyond chapter 4. Please stick to the 4 chapters that we have done until this point. You should be able to find lots of different examples of figurative language in those chapters. You shouldn't have to go anywhere else in the book. I've given you the first example, so you do not have to find a simile. I've given you a simile right here. And so the simile says, in his blue gardens, men and girls came and went like moths among the whispers and the champagne and the stars. So men and girls came and went like moths. That's a simile. It's comparing men and girls to moths. And so I've found an example of that. I've given the chapter where I found it, and then I've written an example, an explanation. So I say, the quote compares older men and young girls coming to and going from Jay Gatsby's parties to moths. Comparing men and girls to moths is a comparison of unlike things, and the word like is used in the comparison, making this a simile. So I've explained the context of this sentence, so what is happening in the sentence, and I've explained why it's a simile. So that's what I'm looking for you to do. I'm looking for you to find a quote from the book that is an example of a metaphor, a personification, a hyperbole, an alliteration, an allusion, and an onomatopoeia. So I'm asking you to find those 6. So 6 quotes, 1 for each. And then I'm asking you to explain why the quote you found is an example of, in this case, in the case of the second one, you're going to give me a quote, and then you're going to explain why it's a metaphor and what that quote means, or the context of that quote in the book. Please don't give me a full paragraph for the quote. Just give me the one sentence, or maybe possibly it could be 2 sentences that you need, but don't go beyond that. But just give me the one sentence that you need to show me the metaphor, to show me the personification, to show me the hyperbole, and then on the next page, the alliteration, the allusion, and the onomatopoeia. And then again, make sure you fully explain, showing me that you know what an onomatopoeia is and why this quote fits. Okay, so that's the goal for this week, is to find examples of figurative language. I would argue, if you go through the book, like if you just go to any page on the book and read through that page, you're likely to find more than one example of figurative language, because figurative language is all over the place in the book. Okay, so I think that finding figurative language is not maybe the hard part, although we'll see how it goes. But I think the hard part is explaining. That's where the marks are going to come, is explaining to me the quote and why it's a metaphor, a personification, a hyperbole, etc. Okay, I do ask that you give me the chapter where you found the quote, and I ask that you stick to chapters 1 through 4. Okay, if that's about it for this week, that's our assignment. If you have any questions about the novel, if you have any questions about this assignment, please just let me know.